Hi, I'm Jack, and I chose to analyze the character Charles Wallace in the story, A Wrinkle in Time. Charles Wallace was an intelligent and confident young boy. Even though he's practically a genius, he doesn't talk much to other people outside of his family. For example, in Chapter 1, page 13, it says that Charles Wallace spoke seldom when anybody was around him, so many people thought he never learned to talk. Most people think Charles Wallace is mentally challenged, but he is not. He's spiritually gifted. He can connect with spirits not in the physical world. A good example of this is in Chapter 4, page 75, when all the kids go on a ride on Mrs. Watson's back, and they land in the field of singing flowers. Meg wanted to know what the flowers were singing, but even Mrs. Watson could not know. She asked Charles Wallace if he was getting the message. This shows that Charles Wallace has some special powers. There are a few challenges that Charles Wallace faced throughout the story. First, being condemned or reeled by the neighborhood people all the time must have been tough for him. Even though they didn't say it to his face, I'm sure he can feel it in their negative feelings about him. He was always misunderstood. Next, being possessed by it was his biggest challenge. Once it has taken control of Charles Wallace, he was trapped in a dark world and couldn't escape on his own. Finally, breaking free by Meg's power of love was another challenge. Charles Wallace had to fight and push it out of his brain to hear Meg's loving message. He thought and heard. Charles Wallace defeated it. In Chapter 11, page 139, Charles Wallace was encouraged to change by the man with the red eyes. The man kept inviting Charles Wallace to look deep in his eyes so Charles Wallace could find out who the man with the red eyes really was. But the pupil in Charles Wallace's eyes got smaller and smaller, and he fell back. He fell into a brief spell until Meg tackled him to the ground and got him back to normal. Sadly, on page 145, the man with the red eyes encouraged him again, promising Charles Wallace that if he looked deeply into his eyes, he would tell him where his father was. He also said that once Charles Wallace entered his eyes, that he was free from all responsibility and would never want to leave. Charles Wallace changed again in Chapter 12, but this time for good. Meg's encouragement was deep message of love brought him back. An example of Charles Wallace's internal conflict shown when he struggles to be a good person but falls victim to evil. He went back and forth trying to fight the man with the red eyes and even punched him, but eventually he got suckered in by the evil man. This is sometimes this because this is because Charles Wallace is too smart for his own good and sometimes causes him to be too confident. I think this could also be an internal conflict. Another example of internal conflict is with Charles Wallace fighting to get out of its control by listening to the love messages from Meg. His good brain and evil brain was in a storm, and finally the good brain won. There is one external conflict that Charles Wallace faces in the story, and that is the black thing. The man with the red eyes, it and the black thing were all the same thing, pure evil. The evil shadows over Earth must be fought with goodness, love, and light. Charles Wallace changed a few times throughout the story. He was first a caring boy who really just connected to Meg and Mrs. Murray. As the story goes on, Charles Wallace connects with the other characters like Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Rich. He starts to sense a lot more things, and his gift gets stronger. Charles Wallace also changed from a sweet child into an evil puppet for it. He gets rude, obnoxious, and a little violent. Last, Meg's love changes Charles Wallace back into his loving self. Overall, I like Charles Wallace's character. He was a big player in the story, and without him, the story would be boring. His character is very interesting because I wish I could have his gift of intelligence and confidence, although it did get him in trouble a few times. Also, I think his character is very unique because there aren't too many young kids with his IQ level, confidence, and special gift. I don't think I would have looked directly into the man with the red eyes, and Charles Wallace is definitely a fascinating character. I really enjoyed reading the story in A Wrinkle in Time. I hope you learned something about this character, Charles Wallace. Thank you.